Okay, and welcome, Bruce, to the third of the sessions that we've run this weekend. This time concentrating at our top level of the honours, the fellowships. So over to you, Bruce.
Thanks very much, Paul, and welcome everybody. Lovely to have you all join us, and I hope we a useful session for you. At the fellowship level, everybody's got quite a good handle, or tends to. I mean, just looking at the list of people here, everybody's got a reasonably good understanding of what the honour system is all about, and probably have been through it once or twice already. And you know, so I could spend a little bit of time talking about how the honour system works and all of that. Is that something that you're interested in? Just if anybody wants to hear that background, just you know, open your mic and say yes please or no thanks. So
you're getting it down from John.
No. Yeah. Okay, so do I take it from that we just move on to talking about fellowships rather than the honour system and how the honours board actually works? Okay, alrighty. So fellowship, what is a fellowship? And I kind of feel that we'll talk a little bit. You know, this fellowship conversation is much more of an open conversation than me just talking like I have at the last couple of sessions. So feel free to ask your questions really quickly as we go. But I'm just going to be a little bit of a summary, and then we can just have an open conversation or just deal with questions, because I think there's a bit more of an exploratory conversation than the ones we've had before. But as you all know, the licentiate is all about understanding or demonstrating your basic craft in photography, that you're competent in the craft of photography. You can use your camera in a variety of situations and you've got general set of skills. And then the associate takes the licentiate another step up. So it's more of an advanced version of the licentiate, and it starts to look to you to express some personal style through your advanced photography. And so we're going from basic craft, then we're going to advanced craft, and building into that advanced craft also some interpretation at the associate level. And those are general skills. So by the time you've finished your associate, the assumption is that you have got some pretty advanced skills. You're starting to express yourself and your own style through your photography, and you're ready to start the journey towards mastery. And that's the fellowship. And so the fellowship, we go from demonstrating your general photographic skills to looking at specific skills in order to do some very specific project. Now, that doesn't mean to say you can't use general skills. Of course, you can use general skills at your fellowship level, but the idea of the fellowship is to take an idea, a concept, a subject, whatever you like, and explore it. And through 18 photographs, demonstrate a depth of exploration that demonstrates your mastery of photography, whether that be in a nature set, so you've really mastered the craft of photography, and you've mastered the craft and art of storytelling of a nature subject. And then if you want to go to the open category, then you can tell this, you know, you can all the different genres you can come to. You can choose any genre you like. You can mix genres if there's a real story that fits into that context. But what we've seen is really good documentary photographs. So tell the story of a particular village or lifestyle or event or something in a way that demonstrates your own personal perspective on that, and it's really clear that when you look at those photographs, that body of work is well conceived. It's been explored to great depth, and it is showing your perspective, so that when people look at it, they're seeing something relatively unique and interesting. And equally, if you want to go to the abstract view, abstract end of the continuum, then you can start exploring abstract concepts. So you want to explore emotion or transition of emotions, and storytelling through abstraction. You can do that through those 18 images, or you can choose an idea like depression, which quite often comes up, and explore that particular aspect of life and do it in a meaningful way so that people know and understand what you're trying to communicate through those 18 photographs. So if you look at the guidelines, if you can say that I've mastered the craft of photography and I can use it to express myself uniquely, I'm an artist and I have my own recognizable style, which I use to communicate through photography, then, and you're able to do that, to tell, really explore a subject and to do it through 18 photographs, then you're ready for a fellowship. Now, 18 photographs, I don't know if any of you have tried fellowships before, but 18 photographs is a lot of photographs. And when you're exploring something in a thesis-like way, to be able to generate 18 photographs that are all different and not similar is quite a challenge. So what we quite often find at the fellowship level is people kind of run out of steam and then start repeating similar photographs and similar compositions and thinking that's going to be good enough just to fill the space and get through the fellowship. And that doesn't work because we see through it quite quickly. The sets that really work are the ones that tell a story, and that story is pretty clear. And we can see the continuity of that story and the development of that story from one image to the other. And it might just be an idea, a concept, or something like that, or it could be a very real story. So what else do we need to talk about? The set does need to hang together as one set. It's not a body of 18 individual images. You certainly have to be able to look at the story that sits across the whole set. So it needs to stand up as one body of work. And when we look at the prints, the layout, of course, needs to look like it. Every image belongs together, and then the whole entity is reflecting the idea as well. From a digital point of view, we also look at the images one after the other with no transition between. So the story needs to flow from one image to the next, and likewise for the compositions, the tones, the colors, etc. That needs to feel like it's one continuous piece of work. And that, I think, from a description point of view, probably goes as far as is practical. The other things that are really important is we expect that at a fellowship level, you're able to present outstanding work, from a production point of view, exploration of your printing style to go with images is often a really good thing. The story that goes with it, your artist statement, those that are very tightly linked to the set are very effective. And we've often found situations where we get read the artist statement before the images go. Well, we see the images, but we read the artist statement before anyone gets to have a good look at the images. And sometimes we get really excited by the artist statement. And then when we start looking at the set, it doesn't reflect the statement, or at least it's not obvious that the photographs are directly related to that statement, or aren't anywhere near as good as telling the story as the statement does. So make sure that you sort of think about that really carefully. Matting, printing, exploration of different materials. I know certainly for my fellowship, I took the concept of it's all about the ocean, and for me, the ocean is cyclical, the day is cyclical, our emotions are cyclical, our sleep patterns, wake patterns are cyclical. So that whole notion of the cycle and the energy that comes from that cycle was really important to me. So that was what reflected the idea. And then how I captured the different aspects of those cycles was reflected in my photography. And I explored the different materials that I could print onto it. So I used galvanized iron. And you might not just flat galvanized iron, and you might not think that that works particularly well with the ocean. But actually, the texture of the galvanized iron with all its crystals is not unlike the texture of water that's got a ripple on it. So the relationship between the photographs and the material I printed them on was really important. And then I used a very narrow format because that helped me capture my waves and my compositions in the way that I really wanted to accentuate the energy that comes from those cycles. So in combination, together with the artist statement, that whole combination is really important when it comes to a fellowship. And we've seen all sorts of exciting media that people have presented on. Digital is great, and then you know, we've had wood, we've had metal, we've had people printing on things like aluminium and then putting resin coatings over the top so that you get that holographic effect. You know, so all of those things are really part of the way you express yourself as an artist through photography, and that is really the essence of the fellowship. All right, so I'm not going to babble on. Does anybody have any questions or want to kick off a conversation? Right, so Paul, there does not appear too much difference in the success rate of digital versus print, but in F's, in the last 3 years, no digital sets have gone through. Good point. Digital and fellowship. I remember one digital fellowship really early on in my time in the Honours Board, and that was what's his name? Scottish chap from Christchurch.
Scott Fowler.
Scott Fowler, that's right. Now everybody knows Scott's work, and he presented his fellowship on digital. And I tell you what, by the time we'd been through 18 images, we were all exhausted. We just wanted to just like fall over and go to sleep because the intensity of those images, because he is an extremely complex thinker when it comes to his photography. And I don't know how his work has evolved, but certainly at that time, there were so many different ideas in every single image. And then we had to try and find the relationships between the different layers of the images, and then the relationship between one image to the next. And I think from it, and it was presented digitally. So the first image came up, and I didn't know what to make of it. The second image came up, and it got more complex. And by the time we got to 18 of these complex images, my brain was in such overload that I didn't know where to even begin to figure out these images. So we started working at the beginning again, and we tried to unpick the different layers in one image. And then we went to the next image and we tried to unpick the layers in that, and to see if there was a common theme that started to flow through each one of the images, etc., etc. And you might ask yourself, if you have to do so much work to be able to understand the fellowship, then maybe it's not communicating very well. But I disagree with that, particularly with that particular set, because it was so complex. And so getting back to the point of whether it would have been more successful as a print or as a digital presentation, and my view on that particular set was it would have been so much easier for us to understand that set if it had been delivered as a set of prints, because you could see them all together. You could then try and figure out what the relationships were between them all, and you could get your head around the complexity a lot easier. So sometimes, Paul, I think digital print works much better. Fellowship, I think by and large, prints work really, really well because you can see the whole concept and idea all in one place. But the successful digital ones that I've seen over the years have got a really good, you get a really good flow from one image to the next. And my experience, and of course, this is just my one particular view, is if you simplify your communication through the digital media, the more effective it is. So one idea followed by another idea, followed by another idea, and you just start building on the same idea as you sort of go through, and that progression from one image to the next starts to build in a relatively obvious way. I think is much more successful for a digital, simply because your brain is only dealing with one thing after the other, and it's quite linear. And your brain doesn't remember what it can't see. It moves on really quite quickly. So if you're designing a digital set, it's probably a good idea to take that concept in mind and simplify the story from one to the next. And I'm not to say that that's absolute, because you know, the digital set from Scott got through and it was highly complex. So you know, that's just some thoughts from my experience. Yeah. Let's go. All right, so we've got at aim level. So John, you mentioned the need for 18 distinct images. I just looked at the successful set on the PSN website, which many look strongly thematic, almost repetitive. Can you talk us through? Okay, so I didn't mean distinctly different images as in diversity, in the sense that that we talk about at the licentiate and associate level, John. The fellowship themes tend to be a lot more thematic, So you've taken an idea and you've developed that idea, and so that's forms the basis of a theme. What I'm thinking, what I was trying to say is that each image doesn't need to be a repetition of the previous one. So if you're doing a very abstract set, then you need to evolve your abstract idea through the 18 images and try not to make those 18 images look quite similar. So if you give me an example of one of the sets on the website that looks problematic to your understanding, John, please just let me know which one it is, and we can go to it and we can talk through it. It might be an idea to actually go to those sets now anyway, and talk through some of these ideas. So let me just.
Yes, you're probably cleverer than me at having two screens at the same time, Bruce. So,
yeah, that's all right. I'll go to the website and you can tell me which one you will.
Well, it's partly when you stand back and look at them as a set, the similarity of the style can be quite strong. And so that led me to worry about when you were saying if you end up with two images that look like they've repeated the same same style, then there's a risk to that. But equally, when I look at the sets as a whole, they do look quite strongly familiar.
Yeah.
Across the set.
Yeah. So I think let's not get confused about the style thing. We are looking for a strong style. If you look at the guidelines, unlike licentiate and associate portfolios, a successful fellowship submission is likely to adopt a thesis-like approach to a consistent subject matter concept or idea. Will illustrate a freshness of approach. A theme portfolio is one way to demonstrate. Style, artistry, and mastery are key to the presentation. So we're looking for a distinct style. So if you look at, let me just share my screen. And I think absolutely you're right, you will see a style, but within that style, you need to see an exploration of a subject without repeating similar compositions or photographs multiple times. We've got that. So can everybody see my screen about now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so, if you look at this set here, they are us. I mean, clearly there's a strong style in that set. I mean, the same technique has been used all the way through, but look at how this photographer has explored the events of the Christchurch shooting through the storytelling in that style. And each one of those lines talks about a different aspect of that story. And we've had a lot of feedback about this. Is this really photography, or is this some other kind of art form? Well, from our point of view, it was a set of photographs because whether they use pencil leads or any other something to create the imagery in the background, they were still delivered photographically in the same way that you might photograph a landscape, for example, because that's been put there. Even in geological times, that's different. So, so this is a creation. It's in a particular style, and it shows an exploration of a subject matter in all its different aspects. And so does that start to answer your question, John? So you'll see each one of those images are different, but you can clearly tell they've got the signature of the person that made them. And over 3 rows, there are 3 very different aspects of the events that come to play.
I can see those ones are individually distinct. I think maybe I'm struggling to look at the different screens. Was there somebody, Hope, a year or 2 back? I was just looking at that set.
Oh, Karen, I wondered whether that was the one that you were thinking about. That's easy enough to talk you through. I'll go to that if it is up here.
To me, looks like a progression of a very common.
Yes. Okay. I don't think it's not up on the website because it might have been further back than 2018.
No,
I remember that set.
The 2019 one there, the first one.
Oh, there we go. This one here. Yep. Okay. Yeah. So this set is, if you read the artist statement, I don't know if they're up here and whether they're easy to find, but the artist statement gave us some clues. And by the time we started to work our way through this, you can actually look at this set in so many different ways. And it was presented on boards which are vertical. So each column was a vertical board with 3 images on, and then they sort of stood together side by side rather than as 18 individual images as is portrayed here. And the concept in this set is basically the destruction of our oceans. So what Caroline has done is she has used bits of plastic and put them in a tank and then lit them up and let them sink, and she started taking photographs. And each one of these photographs, in many ways, if you look at them, you can see sea creatures in each one of these photos. And if you need to use your imagination a little bit, but that's not hard. And as you flow your way across, you start to see the vibrant colors start to fade from colorful to paler colors until eventually we've got ourselves into something that's quite dark and disintegrated. And if you just look at each row or column going down, you see a progression down each one of these columns as well. And as you progress yourself across each one of those columns, you eventually get to the last bluish column that loses its color and then completely and utterly disintegrates into nothing. And that is the effect of plastic in our oceans. And that was a concept, that was the idea. And yes, they do look very similar in style. Each photograph is quite different to the previous one in its not so much in its composition, but in its structure, until eventually we get to this nothingness. So that progression is really clear. Where I had a little bit of a problem with the set are these two photographs over here, because there was a little bit of a difference, and the difference sits with this line over here, and I suspect that might be the surface of her tank, which you just don't see easily in other places. So I got a little bit stuck there, but that is quite small in comparison to the overall concept. So there is definitely a progression, and you can see that this person is able to take an idea, a concept, a thought, and then start this idea with a vibrant something and end it with what we've done to our planet is taken it to almost nothing. And it's all through this plastic, and using the plastic as a metaphor that for the mutation of the plants and the animals and the things that live in the ocean until eventually it's fallen to nothing. So yeah, that's the idea. We felt it really worked well. Does that seem a little bit more obvious to you now, John?
Oh, well, yes, thanks, Bruce. I think it's a tremendous set. I don't have a problem with that. I'm just trying to understand what it was you were trying to say about not having two images ending up looking the same.
Yeah. So I know sometimes with very abstract sets, you can get very similar images following one after the other. And there are a couple of places here where you might argue, these two images on the left and the middle, they'll look reasonably similar. One could look more like a shrimp and something more like some other kind of a fish. But the concept was so strong it was easy to understand. We had a set this year which tried to develop a theme on an emotion, and we felt that it got a little bit repetitious, and then some of the symbolism in the set was confused and wasn't consistently used throughout. So you jump into one frame of mind, and then the symbolism would kick in, and then it would disappear and then pop up later on, and you couldn't quite see the way it flowed through and connected different parts of the story. So the story of this emotion didn't flow from beginning to end in a continuous way like this one can. And the other thing about this set is not only does it flow from along the top row, you can look at this set from the top row across, then to the next row and across, and then to the next row and across, or you can look at it top to bottom and then across that way and that way and that way, So you progress from left to right, from top to bottom, which is also very clever. So, yeah. I've lost my questions. Let me just find them again. How do I do that?
You can, down the bottom, you can just click on the chat.
Because I'm sharing my screen, all the other bits have disappeared.
The next question is from Barbara, and it's, will well-prepared straight images work, or do they have to be high complex digitally composited?
Oh, goodness, no.
Yeah, I'd suggest you probably want to bring up Kirsten's
yes.
answer to that.
Look, Barbara, there are, good photography done really well is amazing. Don't ever underestimate that. So I guess I'm just going to see if I can find. There are a number of sets that I can remember that were very real. Actually, David, your set here, for example, look at this set. Those are very well-made documentary style, talking about what people do in their environment, and very well done. You can see that the perspective that David has used to make these photographs is a particular style, and it flows its way all the way through all these images, and it's an absolute pleasure to see something like this. The other one that I remember that sticks in my mind is Ian Wall's fellowship, and his fellowship was quite simple. It was a mentally disabled girl going for a riding lesson, and the care and the empathy that was shown for this little girl while she's learning to ride a horse by the people around her. And it was a very, very simple story that just flowed all the way through, and it was very, very simple photography. Well, it wasn't simple photography. It came across as looking quite simple, but it captured, every single image captured a very different aspect of the relationship between the girl, the horse, and her carer, until you got to the end of this and you just about wanted to cry. And so those were very straight photography, no major composites, no any funny post-processing or anything. It was just good photography that communicated really well. And then this set here, which is Kirstine's one, again, there's very little digital manipulation that goes on in this set. This is also a very complex set in trying to understand it, because you don't really know what's going on. So you've got to start figuring it through. And yeah, amazing. This generated some fairly interesting reactions on the Honours Board, because you never know what's in people's life experience when you start to see images like that, the things that it starts to bring up. But yeah, and again, this is if you know Kirstine Redshaw, there is absolutely nothing that I knew about her that would have prepared me to expect something like this set from her at all. Yeah, so there's a lot of symbolism. The photography is pretty straight. In fact, it's grungy, and it's in the style of a particular photographer, but she's derived off that, and she's told an amazing story through this set of images. Yeah. Does anybody understand the set at all, or do you want to try and figure a way through it? Paul, you might have to tell me what's in those. Oh, there we go. I can see the chat now. Right. Aha, Barbara. We one of the things about where's the form and flow? Well, in a fellowship, it gets really subtle, and the form and the flow in this fellowship is the story. So if you look at this first image here, it's not very easy to see, but when you see the real thing, it's a very dark, dull, dingy, horrible day, and there's a cross sitting on top of this building over here, and it's in color. So the first thing that happens to you is you feel depressed, right? That's how I felt anyway. And then you go to the next image, and there's an initial, and the light switch is turned on, right? Or is that off? I can never quite remember.
On.
It's on, right?
For New Zealand.
Yep. And then, so you've got dull, switch. What's the connection between those, right? Then you see this kind of image, and I'm thinking, oh, what's going on over here? This, this can take us in different directions, but if I connect it to this image, I'm starting to see maybe a little bit of angst going on. Then I see an image like this, and for me, there's a till. There's money associated with that. Then there's a gun. Then there's a safe, right? And the connection between all of those for me is starting to go in a negative direction. What is this person up to? Then you get to something like this, and they've all got titles which help you along the way as well. So the first one is, I'm just going to, oops, and this is where it is really useful to, how do I zoom in on these? Does it, is there any way of zooming on a,
You need to probably zoom your Safari view.
zoom in? Zoom out, maybe? No, it doesn't seem to do it. Anyway,
Okay.
so these stories, each image is something for light. Press for light.
Pray for light.
Pray for light. Okay, so there's a story in there, and then there's no light. Okay, because this is telling us this is switched off. So maybe that's a bit the wrong way. So the relationship pray for light is no light, and then what does this one say, Paul?
I think it says breather grunge or something. Oh,
Brother
George.
Brother George,
George.
right? And the next one says cash, doesn't it?
Yes.
And then this one says home sweet home, right? So and then it says safe at home.
Yeah.
So, you know, and then the next one it says safe house. But look at the barbed wires and the barriers and all those sorts of things. And then the next one says the
getaway car.
Getaway car. And, you know, you start going in to this depth of things until eventually you said you shot the barman, and then you're into prison, and then you're getting down and down and seeing, you know, in the worst things. And then, you know, this image for me looks like somebody's taking some drugs, and there might well be something about the line as the title. And then there's the one phone call, and then, you know, there's the shirt on the street, and then there's the casket, and then there's the birds. And so I don't think it takes too much to understand what's going on over here, but your real interpretation at the end of the day in terms of what that story is and how you connect to it could vary from person to person. But something sinister has happened here, and this photography has taken us through a journey which has taken us from, you know, hopefulness, pray for light, so a glimmer of hope, to real hopelessness, and then at the end of the day, loss of life. And so that is the story, and that is the continuity that flows through the set. So that the joy about the fellowship is that you don't need to have one image necessarily flowing from one to the other in the sense that it does for the associate and the licentiate. What we're looking for is an idea that flows through and that it holds together from that point of view. And this set absolutely does that in a very, very powerful way in our view. So Barbara, it's not literal. When you get to the fellowship, you can be as figurative as you like, and very, very challenging. And I can tell you that we see so many sets that that actually derail people in the Honours Board, and actually also when people look at these at the exhibition. And yes, Barbara, it's above my train of thought, and that's fine. Not everybody thinks like this, and the joy of the fellowship is that when we get sets like this and some of the other ones we saw this year, they are extremely challenging. And our job as 6 Honours Board members is to get past ourselves and try and unpick these sets in a way that is meaningful and makes sense to us. And the story is here, and all it needs is for you to take the time and effort to try and understand it. And you know, sometimes I see a set where I cannot for the life of me fathom it, and then somebody else on the panel turns around and says, well, it's pretty obvious what this set's trying to say. And I said, well, please explain. And when they do, you kind of go, oh my goodness, my brain sees things differently. Or I'm also closed to certain subject matters because they're out of my experience. And so getting ourselves into that way of thinking is really helpful, and the discussion at the Honours Board is highly important for this set. So the way we work, the way we do fellowships is the first thing we do is we spend as much time as we like with the set, then we go to the vote, and in many ways I find that first vote completely irrelevant, because I know that until we've had a conversation, the full understanding of the fellowship set is not there. And then we will, I mean, if it goes to a 5-6, you know, if it goes to 6-0 success or 6-0 fail, then of course, then there's not a lot of conversation. But if it's any other than that, there'll be somebody on the extreme. So if it's 5-1, for example, somebody thinks there's a merit in it, and I want to know why that person thinks that set should go through. And I know for myself, there was a set this last year where it was 5-1, and I was, and you know, for not successful, and I was the one that put it through. I put through a positive vote, and the reason I put through a positive vote is I was extremely uncomfortable with my own capability to understand and interpret that set, and I really wanted somebody to say something so that I could work my way through it. And as it turned out, there was a 5-1, and by the time, within 5 minutes of people talking it through, I was pretty clear that I was going to change my vote. But you know, that's the way we go through the fellowship. And everyone, is a big discussion, and just about everyone gets a second vote unless it goes through absolutely hands down on the first shot. But even, you know, they get a lot of conversation. Okay, Anna, I'm glad you enjoyed that. I thought it was fantastic too. This one here as another idea of a concept which for me was brilliant. I was so in awe of this set once I'd realized what had happened. So the way I related to this set was simply to say, oh, this is interesting. There's some weaving going on over here. Let me just start exploring through these weaving of photographs together, both as individuals, but also as a whole set, and see where I get to. And by the time I'd got to the end of it, the thing that had started going through my mind was, you know, Annette here had taken a very well-known landscape to us, and she had broken it up into little pieces, and all she is showing in this landscape are the key elements of that landscape, and all the blank spaces in between are leaving our minds to build up the picture within those blank spaces. And as you work your way through it, you realize that actually this is like reading a paragraph where people have left out a whole number of letters, but yet you still be able to get through a whole paragraph because they've left enough letters in for your brain to fill in all the gaps. And to actually take that concept to photography and work it through as brilliantly as this, for me, was just a masterpiece. So for me, this was a level of photography and artistry that that was well above you know, what we see day to day, and the perfection of the work that was put into doing it was also outstanding. So if you saw the set in real life, it is a stunning piece of art, and the concept is really simple. Take a landscape we all know and understand, take out a whole bunch of bits and leave the bits that are important, and let us fill in the rest. And that plays with the emotions, it plays with our brains, it allows us to make this whole landscape whatever we want it to be, but at the same time, we're drawn into the bits that the photographer absolutely wants us to see. So highly clever. And that's a very conceptual piece of work. So we've seen extremes here, from the conceptual bit of work all the way through to something that's much more documentary, such as the set here by David. Then you've got Helen McLeod's set here, which again is another conceptual but built off the idea of the rebuild of Christchurch, highly oh, maybe it wasn't that one, but highly, it's very photoshopped and very constructed, but each one is built on a date stamp, and you work your way through this set. It's been a while since I've looked at the set, so I'd have to spend a bit of time with it again to fully understand the details, but very conceptual in its thinking, and it takes time for you to get through the understanding. Then you've got Gail Stent, who takes the idea of Earth before man, and using a number of techniques in her presentation. So we end up with a lonely planet through the evolution of the animals taking over the plains till eventually when people start to come along, farming begins, our colonization of the planet begins, until eventually the big cities are taking over. And it's an exploration of how we are transforming and morphing the planet, and probably not for the best. And the style that is presented in is very, very much hers. It does abstract, but what she does is she abstracts a background, but then the key elements in the image, such as the people or the animal or the whatever, it's quite sharp. And the perspective is different as well. So you'll see a person or an animal in a landscape, and the perspective of that is the animal or the landscape or the shadow or something is bigger than what you think it should be, or much smaller than what it should be. So she plays off those things too. So it's all very clever and works very well to tell her story. Yeah, so there you go. That's pretty well most of the ones that we've seen recently. And so yeah, the digitals do work. I'd say just make sure that your idea it just flows very nicely from one digital to another one. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Has anybody got any questions? I hope that's helping. Fellowships are really open to interpretation, and we try to give you as big a playing field as you possibly can to be as creative as you possibly can. And we really look forward to being really challenged in our thinking. But the real challenge for a fellowship is making sure you've got your photography sorted, and you're able to tell your story really at a high level. And it's a real exploration of something and takes you on a journey. And that does not have to be abstract. Paul, should we at this stage open the mics and see if people just want to free rein?
Take your screen sharing off.
Yeah, I'll do that.
And like I can ask if you can turn your cameras on, please. Makes it a bit easier in terms of seeing who's actually speaking.
Okay, Kathy, to everyone, what is more important, the photography or the concept? Well, there's no point in having good photography and no concept, and there's no point in having a good concept and poor photography. So I think the idea is, it's the combination of the two that's really important at the fellowship level. I'm sorry if that's too straight an answer for you, but I think you've got to bring them together in a very strong way for your fellowship. Yes, Brian, the ones that we've got up here are the ones that are accepted for any 1 year. Sometimes we get very few acceptances, or in fact, last year, I don't think we got one acceptance. Unfortunately, we can't show those bodies of work, but they were very clearly not accepted from our point of view and needed quite a lot of work. And some of the sets this year were even 2019. In fact, I think 2019, both these sets were repeats actually. So they'd taken the feedback and come back having developed their ideas more and then completed their thinking process. So one of the bits of feedback that we often give is that the fellowships are submitted before you've actually completed the development of the concept. So you can see the elements are there, but actually another step is needed to be able to bring it right to the punchline. And that happens quite often. And we give that feedback, and then people take their work and they build on it a little bit more. And then the next time it comes back, you can see exactly what they're trying to communicate, and it makes a huge, big difference. This year, we had a good number of fellowships come through. Do we not have any digitals this year?
No successful digitals, no.
No successful ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and in
So yeah, this year
2020,
was a very, yeah, 21. I mean, we were delighted because to get 3 fellowships was after no fellowships the previous year was fantastic. Yeah. May I ask Gail how she came to her idea and if she had trouble making up 18 images? Gail, are you there to answer that question? Because I'd forgotten I saw you there. So feel free to talk to your set.
Yeah, I am here, Bruce. Yeah. What was
And
the question again, please?
the question is how you came to your idea and if you had trouble making up 18 images.
I came to the idea because I'm quite passionate about what's happening in the world at the moment, and I have been for quite a few years. And when I first created my first image, it was of Muriwai Beach, and there were just 2 people on the beach. And I realized like maybe I could grow this idea and have the whole concept of the planet before man came here was full of forests, and the oceans were clean and the land was clean and the forests were clean, and man slowly has filtered into the world and destroyed a lot of that and built these big cities to replace all of that. So and that is where my passion lies, you know. So I started developing all the images from there, and it was difficult to get 18 because a lot of the images that I worked on, they didn't work out. And that was, Bruce will remember, that was my second attempt at the fellowship. So the first attempt, they were, should I say the second attempt, what I did was I replaced 3 of the images with better images. And then I also changed the order of them a little bit, and I put the stronger images towards the end of the rows, and it developed the set a little bit differently from that. So yeah, it did take a lot of time, and you know, it wasn't easy just to grab 18 images just like that, but it was eventually it came together.
So you started with an idea, and then you purposefully went and photographed to develop that idea until eventually you got to the point where your 18 images were expressing what you wanted to express, and you were feeling really good about that. So it was quite a big process, if I recall. Yeah,
it was. That's exactly how it went. When you know, I developed sort of 1 or 2 images and realized that I liked the style that I was doing, and decided to build on it. And when I realized that I could put my whole concept together and get the whole thing to work, you know, it was quite a long process getting it there. It was quite a few years. And what I did actually was, after it was 2 years before I got my fellowship, I'd sent it in, and it had failed the fellowship. So I converted it into an audiovisual, and I did very well as an audiovisual with that. And that was on international and national level. And then I thought, right, you know, I wasn't actually going to try again. And then I saw Bruce Burgess, and he said to me, I hope you're going to do this again, you know. So I said, well, you know, I thought of just sort of giving up on it. And he said, no, you need to work on the suggestions that came back from the Honours Board, which I did. And I just sort of covered the suggestions that was in the letter that had, you know, that you guys had given me. And yeah, and then just finished it off and just really replaced 3 images. That was all. And changed the order of some of the images around. Yeah.
Yeah. And the story then went pop. And certainly it was very obvious when we saw it next time. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I know, you know, just reflecting on Gail's comments there, when I did my fellowship, I decided that I was going to do something very different. And there was about 12 years between my associate and fellowship, and I'd started to throw my camera around and do all this blurry stuff. And I thought, oh, that's very different to the work that I've been doing up to that date, which had been lots of abstract patterns and landscapes and bits and pieces. And as I was working, then it took me years to pluck up the courage to try and do my fellowship. And when I started, I said, right, I'm doing it for this year. It took me 2 years to get the images. And probably about 3 or 4 months before the submission, I thought to myself, no, I can't do this. It's just not going anywhere. This is too hard. I don't back myself, and I'm just going to chuck away this idea. And I'm going to go back to what I know I'm good at. And I started to put together a set which was much more traditionally me. And within about 2 or 3 days of trying to do this, my heart wasn't in it. I thought to myself, what the heck is going on here? You know, I'm not committed to the other one because, you know, it's pushing the boundaries too far. And yet I'm coming back to this other work and it's not lighting my fire either. So what is happening? And then I realized that I was giving up on the other idea, and that does not fit well with my psyche. And that when the going gets tough, you've got to just keep going. And so I pushed through with the fellowship. And the next challenge that came my way is I left it, of course, like we all do, right? Well, not all of us, a lot of us, to the last minute to get it printed, because I didn't, you know, my commitment level was a little bit low. Didn't trust it. And anyway, I sent it off to be printed. And when it came back, it was literally the day before it had to be put in the mail. And I realized that I had sent a couple of images that I'd sent for to be printed were not the ones I expected to be printed. So I had not sent all the right images. So, and I had horizontal and vertical layouts, and the ones that came back with the wrong format. So my whole layout was not going to work. So I had a couple of hours of sheer frustration, beating myself up. And then I thought, you know, I've just spent $1,500 printing these darn things. Am I going to just chuck them in the rubbish bin, or am I going to again just pull myself out of the mud and see if I can be creative one more time with a set? And I ended up completely resetting the layout to something that I could never have dreamt of unless I had ended up with the images that I didn't think I should have had. And I looked at it at the end of that, and I was so delighted because it had forced my creativity one step further and created a layout which I would never have anticipated, but actually helped me tell my story so much better. So, you know, fellowships are not easy to do, and they do challenge you, and the satisfaction that you can get out of doing them is really high. Yeah, so that's just a little bit of life experience in that. So Gail probably reflects some of your experience too.
Yeah, it did, because I had more than 18 images, and it was a decision about which ones to put in. And
yeah,
you know, and once again, it was just laying them out and seeing how they worked together, and just whether they, and it is, as you say, it's just what you feel about the whole thing, you know, and you're passionate about it, you know, so.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So thanks very much, Gail. Really appreciate it. It would be, Kathy, it would be really helpful. Let's see if I've got this. Anna, does anyone? Let's get my mouse here. All right. So Barbara, is that Barbara? Kathy, thank you. Anna, do you have anyone that was ready to show us his or her unsuccessful set as an example for your comments? I don't have any. Anna, we could certainly ask people to share that work and as examples, and I think we might even put it onto the submission form this year.
While Bruce is trying to recover, I'll add in there, Anna. So with the other levels, we set up closed Facebook groups, and people have been sharing their feedback. Martin Richardson has created one for the fellowship level. I need to find the link. I couldn't find it just before, but I will post it out later. There may be people who are actually in that group who are actually willing to share their feedback and their video. The feedback over the last 2 years has been considerably better than before. And the feedback on the 2021 sets was a video, which is really useful. So, yeah, going forward, we are going to ask for it as part of the submission if people are willing to actually have their information available to others. We don't necessarily make it publicly available because, of course, people may want to actually resubmit, and the Honours Board are not supposed to know who the sets are coming from.
Yeah, I mean, and if somebody doesn't get through in the first attempt, we never know who that person is. But if the work comes back the following year, we know it's been there before, so we take another really good look at it, which is great. Kathy, be helpful if we could see the artist statements along with the images on the website. I think that's a good idea. So we'll ask for that to happen. I hadn't realized they weren't there, to be honest. Every month in camera talk, so that's from Anna. So yeah, there's a fellowship featured with the full statement and story. That really works nicely. Neil, these experiences are great. Can I please ask David about his experience in formulating and then going for his fellowship? Great idea. Over to you, David, if you're happy to share your process with everybody.
Sure. I did my associate.
Should I share your sense? Should I share your set for you?
Thank you.
Yes,
Yes.
please.
Right, you keep talking and I'll get this up for you.
Okay, I did my associate set on the basis of some photographs that I took traveling around Vietnam some years ago. And when I got to the review of my associate set, I was told that they were a sufficient standard for me to put them in as a fellowship set, and that I should just simply add another half dozen photographs to that set and put it in for a fellowship. I decided not to do that. I went back to Vietnam and China and Laos and Myanmar and several other places, and just simply collected photographs of things that people did for a living. And I became very aware of the difference between hardship and poverty. And it became a bit of a theme really running through, although it's not explicitly stated in the artist statement. There is a theme running through here about people who do tasks that we probably wouldn't see in the West, which in many cases are quite hard to do. Think, for example, about the middle row, second image in from the left, woman sitting there with her daughter on a floor loom. This was a massive loom, and she sat there in that squatting position for hours at a time, weaving this mat. Now, to me, that's hardship, and I wouldn't think anybody in New Zealand would willingly go and do that sort of work. So I became interested in this whole concept of hardship being different from poverty, because none of these people are really poor, but they're certainly working in very hard environments. So that's how I came to do it. I thought of it initially just as an extension of my associate set, and then I decided, no, that wasn't. That didn't seem to me to be a good idea. I really ought to go out and do a completely new set. What I found during the process of doing the images, I also bought myself a printer and did all my own printing. So this was the first lot of printing that I'd done for serious work. And I've since discovered that the learning process associated with doing a fellowship has served me in really good stead later on in doing exhibitions and books. And some of the images that I've collected over the years, I've started putting into books. And the ideas about layout for a fellowship set also apply to things like books and exhibitions. So it's quite an interesting jumping off point for me to have done this.
Yeah, thanks, David. That's really helpful.
Thank you, David.
I hope that
Thank you.
that helped. Okay, so Paul, maybe cover the question from yesterday about taking an APNZ set up to a fellowship set. Yeah, I think there has been an expectation or a perception anyway that a fellowship or an associate is a mini fellowship. That's never been the case, and that might have been practice for some people in the bygone years. But really, the associateship is about showing advanced photographic skills in a diverse, in a diverse way. So it's showing that you've got diverse skills right across a range of different environments and or at least camera skills, etc. So you would, and then the purpose of the fellowship is about specializing. So you can then hone in on one particular approach to and style or genre, and then show that you can master an understanding and communication of something quite specific. So fundamentally, there are quite different approaches to demonstrate. Well, they're demonstrating completely different skills. So if you think that you can easily take an associate, add a few photographs to it, and then push it up to a fellowship, it's probably a little bit of a stretch. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's probably going to be really hard because the approach to each one of those distinctions is quite different. One is more about specialization, and the other one's more about generalization of your skills. So specific skills we want to see in the fellowship, and then general skills we want to see in the associate. So if you look at Kirstine Redshaw, and I think, and again, that demonstrates, I think, a diverse set of images, but it shows that she's actually able to use those to develop a very specific story, which is focusing in on one specific storyline and an idea that flows through each one of those images. So that doesn't mean to say you can't achieve a fellowship without a diverse with a diverse set. Of course you can, but it is still specializing. It's still a specialist approach, which is an exploration of an idea. You can do that through diversity, which is quite different to the exploration of the idea of Carolyn Hope and the creatures in the water and the way that degenerates to nothing because of the destruction on our planet. So the great thing about the fellowship is it's a very, very big open field for you to play in, and it is about trying to create the space for you to be creative in your own way. I hope that answers that question for you, Paul.
Yeah, it was more in terms of the question that was raised yesterday. So people was about Julia Ray's APSNZ
associate
and associate set, and the question was, could it be turned into a fellowship by basically adding another 6 images to it?
Yeah, I think that concept could definitely be raised to a fellowship, but probably not through those images. All right, any more questions? You've been quite a lot.
Yeah, Bruce, I've just got one more comment to add on to what I said earlier on. I really agree with the theme that's gone through all of these talks, that it's worthwhile considering it as a separate project. Part of the reason why I was successful, I think, is because I set off with a particular project in mind and got lots of images. I ended up with something like 84 images, I think it was, that I chose the eventual 18. And it was really hard going down from that number of images down to the set. I had the opposite problem to what many other people experience. And my mentor did me the greatest service by asking me, in the case of each image, why do you want to put this in? Why were you thinking about this as a part of a set? And made me really think about it, instead of just simply looking at an image and saying, yes, I like that and I want it there. I was
Where do I
constantly
find a space for it?
constantly challenged to as to why particular images were part of the set.
I think that's really good advice to everybody. I think particularly for a fellowship, because if it is about it, this is of all the honours that PSNZ offers, this is the which is the development of an idea. And if you've ever done any courses on photography that take you up a few levels, you'll discover this concept of developing an idea and then iterating on that until eventually it gets to a point of development where you are comfortable with it. And that process is comes to play very strongly with the fellowship. Of course, we've all got different ways of engaging with that process. And certainly for me, it was about, what is the idea that I'm trying to get across here? And then and like David, how do each one of these images contribute to a different aspect of that idea, so that eventually in combination, they are taking me to a place which has explored the different aspects of this idea. So it can be multidimensional. So I can only speak about mine right now because it's the one that's easiest for me to talk about. So we spoke about the cycles of the day, the cycles of the ocean. So we've got to see the ocean coming, we've got to see the ocean going. We've got to see the day coming, we've got to see the day going. And then I decided I was not going to have a single sharp image with it. And the reason I wanted that is because I also wanted to show the cyclical nature of our emotions. So throughout that set, those tones and colors and textures that I used also had to reflect the coming and going of emotion. Now that might be less obvious for other people and quite important for me. So there's three different things that are going on in that set. And when you are developing your idea, so that's the idea. And then when you're developing your set, what you need to do is to say, as David has just outlined, how do each one of these images contribute to the idea and flesh it out in a way that other people can see and understand it? And you've only got 18 images to do it. Yeah, hope that makes sense. Yeah, Barbara, it's fairly obvious to me that the idea.
Bruce, can I just add something to about my set as well?
Yes.
Just remembering back about what you're saying now. I had this concept and I was thinking of how was I going to put it across, and so I had the whole idea of having 3 rows, and on that first row I would have from the beginning when there was nothing, and then it developed into man, and I only showed one person. And then in the second row where man started to build and develop and cut down forests and everything like that, I showed 2 people in the images. And then in the city, the bottom row where I had a lot of city shots, where man had replaced the cities replaced the forests and open fields and things with cities, and I showed 3 or more people in those images. So that was that whole concept of I was trying to think, how can I show this to show that development as well, of the increase in population.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And that idea, I just see Barbara says it's fairly obvious to me that you have to have the idea first. It can't evolve, particularly hard for the likes of me. It's really hard for me too, Barbara, but I think people that have got their fellowships will probably all agree that the idea does evolve. So you come up with a gem of an idea and, you find something you really want to do, and then you start doing it and you find that it's really hard and you discover something else. And so you sort of increment on the idea until eventually the combination of the first gem of an idea and what's practical or within your capability all start to gel, and you start building some confidence that you can actually do this. So I think everything is iterative. So certainly for me, I did not start initially with those 3 dimensions which I outlined to you. I started with a single idea, but as I started to work my way through the images, a whole bunch of other issues popped up, and I started working on them until eventually everything came together in the end. So I think I completely agree with you that it's hard to come up with the idea first, and I think you would not be unusual. I think everybody in the room would agree that coming up with a really clear idea up front is really, really hard, but there might be a gem, and everything evolves together until eventually you have your fellowship. So don't give up because you want to look at it from that perspective. I certainly think you've got the capability to develop an idea, and we're all very different about how we find the ideas, how we capture those ideas, and how we develop them to a final body of work. So don't feel you have to fit the mold here. Nature and FSETs. Okay, on nature FSETs harder to do given that none have been successful in recent years. Paul, yes, nature sets are quite hard, and I don't know that they're any harder than any of these other abstract sets that we have been seeing. What we have found with nature is that telling the story of whatever it is that you are focusing on, maybe, I don't know, I just think about, I don't know, the life cycle of a bird, for example. You choose an aspect of their behavior. So maybe from a pair getting together to mating, to having a chicken, to that chick growing up and being a fledgling and then eventually flying off and doing its own thing. That tends to be an approach that a lot of people come up with. And so, you know, traditionally, what we see is a whole set of images that pick up bits of that story. At a fellowship level, though, what we're looking for is a real articulation of the key elements of that story, or key elements of a perspective on that story, which maybe we haven't seen before or hasn't been shown in the way that it's been seen before. And that can be quite hard because it's nature. And we've seen some amazing nature sets which almost get there, but then leave out a critical bit or repeat one bit too many times and then leave out other elements. So you've got 18 images to tell a big story. So you need to be able to only leave in the important bits and not repeat too much, because you're not using your 18 images to the best effect. And we've seen some amazing nature nature sets that don't quite capture everything, but are really getting close. And you know, I can think about some of the bird ones where what is the different perspective that you want to offer with this mating, or you know, this sort of getting together and then having the chick fly off. You know, you can get a really close in view of the world, or you can get a very wide angle view of the world so that you see the story around, and anything in between, and then how that photographer pulls those elements together to give us a perspective which is really good is quite hard. But there's nothing easy about the fellowship, so I don't know that nature is any harder than the rest. It just has to tell quite a comprehensive story, and we do have a nature expert sits on the panel, whether it's one of the members or whether it's somebody else that we bring in to help us understand these nature sets. But those people have got a wide range of knowledge and understanding of the natural world, and there are certain critical elements to the story that need to be there, and they're very good at helping us understand that. Okay. Well, I didn't think we'd go this long with the fellowship, but it's been really good.
Yes, it has been good.
All right. Well, if there's nothing more, there's no point in us, carrying on. So, is there anything final that anybody wants to ask or get a perspective on?
Just some little logistical things. I mean, you've all been through it before, so you pretty much all fail on this, but submissions for 2022 will open around the 16th of January, and they close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of February. That is a hard close date, and it is the date that your SAT must be received by Stephanie in Invercargill. It's not the date you send it. So obviously, if you are doing a print set, and as we've heard today, the prints do seem to have a slightly higher success rate than the digitals. Bear in mind, you have to have time to print them and you have to have time to actually send them. And given postage delays at present, I would probably recommend that you want to factor in a week minimum to guarantee that they're down by to Invercargill. The Honours Board is scheduled to meet on the 11th of March. So they don't have a lot of time to actually turn the sets around to make them available for everybody. And that's why it's a very hard and fast rule on, miss that deadline and all your work will be down the drain. And I guess the other lesson that we've had with the last couple of months is allow plenty of time for printing, because as our people in Auckland are still stuck, you can't get stuff to printers at present. So, or matters or anything like that. So we're in very uncertain times. So I guess if you're making the commitment, make the commitment early and don't leave it till the last minute.
Great, thanks, Paul. And stick with it, everyone. Fellowships are hard, but they're really well worth the effort. Barbara, I see you popped in another question here. It seems to me, or it's an observation, seems to me that negative emotions are easier or more successfully portrayed than positive ones. I wouldn't say that personally. And I also wouldn't say that they are more successfully portrayed than positive ones, because what you don't see is what we see. And the assumption sitting behind that is that we get lots of positive emotions shown to us, and we don't. So I think as an Honours Board, there is absolutely no reason whatsoever why joy and happiness should not be reflected in a fellowship. There's definitely no prejudice against it, and I would absolutely welcome it. And I have to say that Ian Wall's set, although it was of a disabled young lady, was hugely positive and joyful. So I don't think we should make those kind of assumptions. So if you do exactly what you want to do, and don't let anybody limit you in any way, shape or form. It's your creative energy, nobody else's.
Okay.
Cool.
Fly free as a bird. That's my view.
Yeah, thanks for that. Sorry, it was just even when I'm doing my own images, to do the grungy or the slightly dark or the slightly moody is an awful lot easier than to do the sunny and bright and happy, and it's easier to do photographically, in my opinion.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But no, don't let anything limit you. You do what you want to do, because the fellowship is absolutely all about you. And if you're not, and this is my honest and sound advice to everybody, is the moment you start to move away from your own authenticity and true self in your fellowship, it will not work. Okay, so you have to be true and you have to be vulnerable. And those are the sets that make the biggest impact on people. And it's a scary place to go, because you make yourself really, you bare yourself to the world, and that's a very scary thing to do. But that's what happens at the fellowship level by and large. So it's take a leap. It's really rewarding.
Cool. Well, on that great note, I think I'm going to stop the recording because it's a brilliant end point.